Good evening, everyone, and welcome. This is the April 23rd Town Hall meeting of the Board of Education of Charles County. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Yanel Morley, Chairperson of the Board. On behalf of my colleagues, I first want to thank each of you for joining us this evening. Thank you to Superintendent Dr. Navarro and staff, our teachers, parents, students, and community members, and those who joined us either here in person, virtually, or watching the live stream. My colleagues and I appreciate everyone gathering this evening for the Town Hall. As you know, tonight's discussion will be around our budget. Before we begin, I want to review the format for tonight's Town Hall. While the focus is on the Superintendent's proposed fiscal year 2025 operating budget, all topics related to education are welcome. We will begin with a brief presentation from Superintendent of Schools, Dr. Maria Navarro. For those community members joining us this evening, the board will welcome questions, ideas, topics, and other updates. This will follow the budget presentation. For anyone here in person who wishes to speak, please make sure you've checked in with a staff member at the main desk outside of the boardroom. To allow for a smooth flow of speakers, we're asking all speakers to take a number from staff. If you would like to share comments in person and did not check in outside of the staff room, I ask that you please do so at some point to get an assigned number. We will rotate in-person speakers with our virtual speakers. Staff from the Charles County Public Schools Office of Communication will assist with the flow of tonight's speaker rotation and are overseeing the live stream. I do ask that all speakers and comments attempt to limit their time to allow everyone who wants to ask a question or provide comments with an equal opportunity to share. We'll ask you to please limit your comments to 3 minutes. We also want to be respectful of everyone's time, as our goal is to allow anyone who wants to share tonight some time to do so. If at any time you think of questions, please either raise your hand or get a number from staff outside of the boardroom. I also want to share a reminder about the board's rules for public forum, most of which apply to tonight's town hall. All speakers should identify themselves, and any comments should relate to Charles County Public Schools or other education-related topics. Exceptions to these rules are the following. Please be mindful of these exceptions when sharing your comments. Personnel matters, pending or potential appeals, or comments regarding the actions or statements of individual staff or the private lives of any individual are not appropriate topics. On behalf of the board, I also ask that attendees use proper language and decorum at all times. The intent for tonight's town hall is for board members and staff to listen and to talk with community members. Open dialogue and feedback are our ultimate goals, and tonight's format will run smoothly if we all respect each other and those who choose to share and or ask questions. Please remember these guidelines for tonight's town hall. I will now turn it over to Dr. Navarro to introduce the presentation.
I'm going to go sit over there.
Sure. All right.
Good evening, board members and attendees.
Good evening.
Good evening. So this evening, I will be going through a theme-based overview of our budget. I know that Ms. Acton has presented the numbers in a way, but I thought that tonight, for those who are here and who are watching us, it would be important to go through the themes of the bodies of work that are in our 2025 budget request. I just want to remind everybody that our budget in detail, it's several pages long, is available on our website, and at any time people can peruse through it to look at the details of the cost, the ask, and then at the very end of our budget, there's details for every single item that is in the budget request for this year.
Dr. Navarro, pardon me one moment. Mr. Heil was attempting to connect as a panelist. Can you please see if you can, thank you. All
Yes. And please interrupt me at any time.
Sure.
Oops, I can't touch that. Let me know when I can go back to presentation mode, Shelley.
Bless you.
We have a lot of people in their comfort of their home watching our presentation, which is great.
Our millions.
Yes, which is great for technology.
Yes.
It makes total sense. or if you're sitting in your kids' practice, you can also tune in live.
Was that aimed at a specific group, Dr. Navarro?
Yes. A bunch of parents that I left at the pool that I said, tune in while you watch your kid practice.
You're right.
It's very easy. Okay, great. Thank you, Shelley.
All right.
So the first thing that I want to recap for everybody is that the CCPS proposed budget for FY20 for fiscal year 25 was an ask of $523,360,000 plus. This is an 8.9 increase from the previous year's allocation, and it was important that for our viewing community that you were aware around the trend of the last 5 years in terms of county funding. And what I want to highlight is in the last 5 years, not including fiscal year 2025, if you look at the very last column, we have been privileged to be funded fully last year and almost fully the previous year. But if you note, the very last column does show that over time, Charles County Public Schools has sort of lost its footing in terms of the percentage that is that of its funding that out of the total county funds. So it's sort of lost its slice of the pie in the last several years. And if you actually go back a couple more years, you'll see that we were as high as about 47, almost 48% of the county's budget. And so in the last 10 years or so, we've frankly lost ground. And I want to highlight for our viewing community that that is concerning. Public education is a fundamental bedrock in every single community. And the concern that I want to elevate for our viewing community is that the public schools are losing ground at a time where we need to be doing exactly the opposite. And I'll talk about why that is. So last week, we learned that when the county staff presented to the commissioners, we learned that our request of 523 million plus is not scheduled to be fully funded. It is scheduled to be funded at about a 506 million plus, which leaves a deficit of about $17.3 million of an ask. And the reason that we wanted to highlight this is that we really need the community to understand what are those implications for our community, for our students, for all of our students, and moving forward in Charles County. So tonight, I thought I would talk a little bit about the themes of the work that really drives the work throughout CCPS. And I want to go back to the strategic plan in Charles County. Our number one focus is student learning and achievement. We are focused on instructional materials, professional learning, and monitoring of student outcome data that shows improvement in student learning and achievement. So one of our main goals, for example, is that we increase the number of third graders that are reading on grade level. That is an important metric that is on our strategic plan in our website. And I will say that the school has been making gains as far as since 2018, actually. Prior to the pandemic, the system last year had the highest number since 2018 of students scoring on grade level in terms of their reading ability. Is it where we need to be? Absolutely not. But the school system is showing progress year after year. The second area of the strategic plan, it calls out for increased access, supports, and opportunities for students. And we have come to the board several times talking about our non-apologetic projects that support more kids being ready for whatever it is they choose to do once they graduate. And that starts as early as saying that we are supporting students with programs and accessibility that better prepares them for what they want to do. That includes things like advanced coursework, early college opportunities, more opportunities to take high school courses in the middle schools, and goes all the way down to elementary, where we are even expanding and building on the fact that many of our students are emerging bilinguals, and so we are using that as an asset, and with an asset mind frame, we're starting our two-way immersion programs. And finally, and especially because after the pandemic, we continuously work on solidifying the culture and the climate in every single one of our schools and providing supports accordingly to students so that they can not only be learning the content areas, but also being all around well-rounded with behavioral supports as needed. Our work is very, very much intertwined in the work of the blueprint, and you can go onto our website and see all the details of the blueprint, but we also have large investments in early childhood. We are working on all the expansion of the programs that I just mentioned, and more importantly, we are trying out different ways in which expands more targeted supports and resources to students that need it the most. So I want to talk a little bit about what is the state of the youth in Charles County Public Schools. But before I go through all these identifiers, I want to remind the community that these identifiers by no means that our students do not have the capabilities and the tenacity to fulfill themselves. They're obstacles that are imposed on them, but they are not obstacles that without the right supports and with the right educational programs, we can see students thrive and succeed. So our students are more and more every year impacted by poverty. In 2013, we had about 33% of our students impacted by poverty in some level based on household incomes. If you look at that today and what is projected for next year, we're almost at 50%. We're 49% projected for next year. That is not a final sentence of what your educational experience is going to be. It just means that we need more resources to do some of the wraparound services for families and our students that ensure that they are actually ready to learn when they come to school. The number of students identified as English learners has risen quite a bit. And that is an asset to the school system. That means that over the years, we will be graduating bilingual students. And that's an asset. And everybody that is in the workforce knows that that's an asset. So this is an opportunity in the making for Charles County. We just need to provide the right supports. And I'll tell you that the number of students, I don't have the data in front of me, but the number of students that reach the seal of biliteracy this coming year that you'll see for in graduation is higher than last year, which is higher than the year before. And so I'm excited to see more and more of our students become bilingual in many ways. And so we call out today, the investment of today that we do in public education will make sure that these students meet their full potentials. We have students that need more supports, identified deeper levels of supports. We've gone from a population of about 2,500 students being served with IEPs or additional specific supports to 4,600 this current school year. That requires staff that understand how to support students, intervention materials that are evidence-based, that show that students can thrive, just giving access and opportunities to those. And that just means that we need to be responsive. And then since the return to in-person learning, as you know, we've needed to work on the behavioral and mental health of students. Honestly, we've always needed to work on this in public schools, but we've taken a much stronger stance on this. And so when I go back and say that we are losing ground on the slice of the pie that we represent in terms of the county's budget, it is imperative to say that this is not the time to do that based on the students that we're serving today. And so those investments need to double down at a time when we know that the demographics and the needs of our students are calling for it. So in our budget, there is several themes that are important. First and foremost, our school system is the people that make up our school system. Our biggest asset are our people. And so one of the things that you see in our budget is the request to continue to remain competitive. The biggest bulk of our budget, the biggest slice of the pie in our budget is people. Their expertise, their ability to provide them professional learning, and their work with children every single day is our biggest investment. And so in the budget, we request compensation that allows us to bring new people, retain the people that we have, and continue to develop their expertise to support our students. Another major theme, there we go, is, as you saw in the blueprint, and it's also in the strategic plan, is doubling down on our investments in early childhood. And Charles County is moving at a faster rate than the requirements in the blueprint around early childhood, because we know that the research says that investments in early childhood pay off later on in terms of student achievement and overall performance. And so it is imperative to do so. And in this budget, we expand another early learning center to support the Waldorf community. Our research is showing that every year, since we came back from the pandemic, we've increased scores in terms of readiness for kindergarten from our pre-K students that we service, both in the KRA and in the Acadians Universal Screener that we use as an in-house assessment to progress monitor our students' success. So you will see large investments in our FY25 budget, and I would say this is a big investment that we have to double down on in this year and in coming years. I talked a little bit about other indicators that impact students' ability to be ready to learn when they come to school. And hence we have expansion of community schools. We have 5 wonderful community school coordinators right there. They are incredible. I see them everywhere on the weekends, in the evenings. I don't even know if those people don't have a bedrooms in their respective schools. In this budget in FY25, we're expanding to 5 more schools, which you can see who they are. But I want to highlight the types of work that they're doing in the community. They are providing food pantries. They're providing extended tutoring support. They are providing extended learning programs, mentoring, and not only academic supports, but also health supports, and they all have an additional community nurse for screenings. All of the things that if not supported really can deter our students from being really ready and present to learn. So in our budget, we expand to 5 additional communities to become community schools. We also started this year, the board received funding and started this year expanding supports at the secondary level by having youth engagement advocates in all high schools. And we've given some reports on their work so far. This budget knows, and it was always the thought, that we would go into middle school, because at the secondary level, we know that we have to spend additional resources ensuring that we have adults who continuously connect with students, who are not just reactive but proactive, and they're not just proactive with engaging with students but also families. And so the youth engagement advocates are also on the FY25 budget for all middle schools and also at the Steedham Educational Center. We have an aggressive ask. This is the number one thing that I have heard consistently since I've been here, and that is that at the secondary level, in middle schools, we don't have any after-school athletics or sports and clubs, and then that even though we do have them at the high schools, many students are not participating because of access to transportation. So in our FY25 budget, we put it in because the community has queued up that this is important to them and that they want to make sure that more students participate, and I 100% agree with them. So in our budget, we have about a $3.3 million ask. It brings in all the activities in the middle schools that allow our students to participate year-round, and it brings transportation at the high school and the middle school so that transportation is not a barrier for your participation. In our budget, we call out specific interventions for students. And one of the things that we're looking at as we are expanding our vibrant English learner community is that we need to bring in more teachers who can support and work with classroom teachers to support English language learners. So we have an ask to increase the staffing in that area. We also have a need for more specialized services, and so we find that the earlier that you identify and support a child and give interventions, the better that is. And so we're asking for additional staff to support our child find process programs, which go early from birth until age 3 into the community, and we are able to, once we identify students that qualify, we're able to provide them services again from age 0 to age 3 as they get ready to enter our pre-K programs. And then overall, we have targeted instructional interventions in reading and math. I want to say that we have made several presentations around the fact that we shifted away. This was a district that had reading recovery, and I know that was a difficult move away from, but it was a non-negotiable. If we're going to move towards evidence-based interventions and supports for accelerating the students that are not yet reading on grade level and ensuring that they do catch up. So the instructional interventions that we have in reading and also in math continue that trajectory, and continues that trajectory not just in elementary school but into middle school and high school. And then we really wanted to expand what we're calling year-round supports for students and families in a couple of different areas. We know that we need to work with families sometimes that are going through, that are in crisis through the summer, so that we can help provide them, connect them with services that ensure that their student is ready to start the new school year in a way in which they're really ready to learn. So we wanted to expand the opportunities for our PPWs, our psychologists, our counselors, to be more of them to be 12-month employees. I think that we have an excellent group of student services employees, and if you give them the primal practice of working deeply with families and stabilizing students to be ready to return back to school and in a successful manner, maybe some of the students that know our code of conduct maybe a little too well, I think that if we gave them the opportunity to do this work over the summer, we would see huge dividends in decreasing the number of students who come back to school and they are just going through so many different things that they're not yet ready to meet with success. Beyond that, the reality, if you have a child in high school, is that course selection, getting ready for your senior year, your counselors are always busy. And so we do need to expand the number of counselors at the high school to help students. They change their minds about courses. There's a lot of things happening in high schools, and we need more staff to be able to support families in those decisions over the summer so it doesn't come back as a huge tsunami wave at the beginning of the school year and students can't start right off the bat in the courses that they need to be in. So that's also on the budget. And then we need additional support for our students with IEPs and receiving special services in terms of monitoring and supporting their summer programs as well. So the notion that schools slow down during the summer or are closed during the summer, it's just not true. And there's a lot of work that we really want to work with our families and our students over the summer that we know is going to better prepare them to start the year in a really solid place. Finally, this budget queues up specific career options, instructional materials, and courses and programs that meet the need of students. It expands AP courses. It expands career certification programs. We specifically called out the theater pathway in McDonough. The school system has invested, the county has invested very, very large amounts of money in the reconstruction and redesign of McDonough. And so we need to now live up to the academic programs that go into those beautiful spaces. And that includes the theater arts pathway. We also have additional industry certifications and credentials that CCPS pays for. We are paying for students' AP exams, we're paying for their credentials, and the reason we're doing it is because we don't want funding, we don't want money to be the barrier of reaching your full potential. And then I think the other pieces that are important to highlight is our new dual language program, our two-way immersion program, and additional supports for programs like home and hospital, and then additional supports for students in the arts. And then probably the less sexy of the budget, but the very necessary is we are the second largest employer in the county. We have the largest IT company in the county. We feed more people than anybody else in the county. We move people more than anybody else in the county. We are a large organization, and we need to keep systems of strong operations. And so here you see several things from, you know, we hire the most number of any company in the county, so we are expanding our HR systems. We use technology and need technology staff to do this, and we use a lot of learning tools that include IT tools, and we need to innovate. So we are bringing on a learning management system, which families will understand what that is as we roll it out this year, but it is a better way to communicate what kids are learning, and it's a better way for students to communicate with their teachers about what they're learning, that learning experience. So all of these systems of operations are really interfacing and making our school system the most modern and the most up-to-date system that it can be. And so we have several items in the budget that ensure that we're able to pay people on time, not fall behind in terms of IT and technology resources, and a whole bunch of other areas in the school system.
About 900,000 earmarked for like laptops. I don't know if this is a better question for Ms. Thompson. Can you give us an idea of what that currently looks like, to your point about technology? And
Yes,
what,
so
yeah.
I think in the budget, we actually had, I think, even higher ask for technology. I think it was 1.1 million, but I will let the budget people just join me whenever they're ready to do that. But yes, part of it is we have been one-to-one device.
Right.
That is a very expensive thing to continue forever and ever. And then frankly, I think we're also going to be shifting around, if we have technology and the device conversation, where does it have the greatest impact? So we will be evolving that conversation. Regardless, we still need to upkeep our technology. And so some of it is the student devices that we know and love that come home every day, but some of it is also infrastructure, so Wi-Fi access, and other infrastructure that is needed to maintain these huge systems that are every single one of our building, where you just go in, open your laptop, and you can get in and anywhere. So that was the overall in terms of my presentation, my overview, and I'm happy to answer any questions or take any questions.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Navarro.
Yeah, thank you.
That was excellent. I'll start first. Any questions or comments from the board? And then Ms. Mackey, you can let us know the speaker order. Thank you. So does anyone have a question or comment? You do? Okay.
I just wanted to say for the IEP, it's great to hear that we are actually putting the money where we're supposed to put it at, and we're doing what we're supposed to do, and that we're taking it serious. And by taking it serious is we put the money in these programs, and we're investing in these programs because of the big jump from 2012 until now. That's something that I don't think that the public knows. 4,600, that's a lot. So we have to prepare for each and every child. Every IEP plan is different, so you have to have people in place to do all those things. And I'm so glad that we're going to dig into that whenever it's on the agenda, so you can fully get us to understand that and the public to understand that. So thank you.
Thank you. Was there another staff presentation, Dr. Navarro? Or?
No.
Okay.
We
All
have-
right. Okay. All right. Okay. Ms. Smith and then Mr. Lucas. Oh, he was first? Okay, Mr. Lucas.
Actually, I was going to, Ms. Butler-Washington said exactly what I was going to comment on. And there's no magic pot of money that comes with, mandated things that we're required to do. And, this is something that the county has taken great pride in over the years. And Mr. Hancock will remember, we gave a presentation a few years ago at our legislative breakfast to the commissioners and the delegates, and even then about the rise in the number of students with IEPs. And some students, it's not even tens, it's close to even hundreds of thousands of dollars. Not that there are that many of them.
Yeah.
And that all comes out of the operating budget. And I think it's important to highlight that. And it's a challenge across the state, as the superintendent has said. A lot of the vacancies are in the area of special education. But I just thank you for pointing that out, Ms. Butler-Washington, and I think it's a very good presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Smith and then Ms. Samisha Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll be brief because I definitely want to hear more from the community since this is a town hall. So this is your opportunity. Dr. Navarro, thank you for the presentation. Definitely appreciate the way in which you've parsed out the information. This is a very heavy budget in terms of it's loaded down with lots of information and things that we're looking to do. I think your job, in addition to being superintendent, is obviously being the CEO of community engagement. So I know that you have been traversing the county as we have, talking to families, trying to get a sense of what do families truly value, what are the opportunities they would like to see for their children, absolutely speaking with staff to figure out what are those professional development opportunities. You as the visionary for the county and education, figuring out where do you need to move staff relative to professional development and making sure that they're properly prepared to support students. So I know this budget reflects a lot of the groundwork that you've done, but I also know that it reflects conversations that we've had with our various communities around, again, what are the opportunities that families want to see? But not only the opportunities to grow and move forward, but also those opportunities where they have lost some ground because of the pandemic. And I see a lot of that here. So I'm just really hopeful that we can find a way of getting back to the levels of funding commitment that we've had in previous years from the commissioners so that we can, in fact, make ourselves whole. So appreciate the way in which the presentation was laid out and looking forward to hearing from the community.
Thank you, Ms. Samisha Thomas.
Thank you, Ms. Morley. As we look towards the budget, the one thing that I would say is, we talk about technology and we talk about the need for our students to be prepared from a technology perspective, and it's not at an inexpensive cost.
Yeah.
It's the refreshing of the laptops. I know some children, and you may have them at home, who has lost your laptop or broken your laptop, or, and it's the security network, the infrastructure. I mean, even retrofitting some of those buildings that were not intended to have a backbone, a Wi-Fi backbone, right? And so we have done a great job in helping our children be prepared for what they will encounter in the workforce, but it's the sustainment. And that's really important because we don't want to get there and then, as I told my daughter the other day, who runs a marathon and sits down at the last mile? Nobody, right? And so we really do want to make sure that we continue this. And I know it's a difficult and heavy lift, But the budget, if you look at it, I encourage parents to go out and really look at the budget line by line, and then think about what your child is experiencing, their educational experience, and we'll hold it accountable, and we want you to hold us accountable, and then we want to make sure that we're doing our due diligence and being fiscally responsible and aligning that to our strategic goals. So I really appreciate the work that we've done. I know Ms. Acton and her staff are working hard. It is a major lift to align this to the blueprint and the strategic goals that we have, but at the end of the day, we're doing it for every single student in this community, every single student, no matter what their need or level is. So thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Thomas. Any other comments by the board? I just want to echo a lot of what my colleagues have said, and in particular your last point, Ms. Thomas, that we're doing this for every student. So it's not just the students that need the special services, but it's also the AP students, you know what I mean, and just the students that are just not in any honors classes. It's every student. You know, we have to feed these students. We have to provide mental health services. You know, several of us have visited the community schools, so you understand the dire situations that they're helping to support. So this is not something that's to be taken lightly. And as I mentioned last night, roughly slightly less than 90% of our budget has already been directed, you know what I mean, between staff and their staff, thank you, benefits, I couldn't think of the word, between staff and benefits, and then our contractual services. You know, it's still a lot of money, but it's not a lot of money, if that makes sense, because so much of it is already earmarked. And so when we have those constraints, we're always finding ourselves in these difficult situations of asking, you know, as I said yesterday, what's above the line, what's below the line, and we don't want to think of anything in terms of not being important, because that's not at all what this is about. It's just that the things that we must do have to first take priority, and there's a lot that we must do as a school system, especially at, you know, one of the larger ones, candidly, in the state. So with that said, Ms. Mackey?
I'm over here.
Oh.
Switch spaces, sorry.
You teleported.
Yes, so we have a couple speakers here in person as well as virtually via our Zoom. I think Mr. Heil had his hand up on our virtual meeting, so I want to go ahead and start with Mr. Heil.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Mackey. I have a question for Dr. Navarro. With the total shortfall, with what the commissioners are saying they're funding, what would be the percentage of the budget that would be funded if we have to go with that number, if that question makes sense? If we are only able to go with what the commissioners are funding, what is the total percent of your requested budget that would be funded, I guess is a better way of asking it?
Yeah, this is like a math problem that I'm looking at the mathematicians to pull out their calculator. So right now, we have to say, so 533 million would have been at 100%. We don't have 17 million less, 17.3. So I'm going to respond to that question after Karen looks it up, because I can't do the math right now, Mr. Heil. Can we come back to you? She's actually putting it in her phone calculator right now, that we're going to be short. I will say that I am worried about what our, you know, we're going to be at about 40 to 41% again of the county slice of the local budget. We really wanted to gain some ground on that. We wanted to be higher into the mid 40s because of everything that I sort of mentioned that we really need to double down and continue to fund. Karen, what do you have? Do you have one?
96% funded.
Without the 17 million, so yes, about 96% funded. So about 4% unfunded.
It doesn't sound bad until you hear the 17 million, and then
That part.
then it's bad.
Yeah, I was gonna say. Yeah, because that 4% is, you know, other utilities, equipment, and then supplies and materials. Each of those are 4%, so it's substantial.
still huge.
Yeah, oh yeah,
It's huge.
absolutely.
Mr. Heil, do you have any more questions, comments? Or can I switch to someone else? Awesome, thank you. Mr. Terry, do you want to start in person for us? You can either use this mic, come up to the table, come up to the podium, whatever your preference is.
Okay. Name's Derek Terry. Greetings, Chairwoman Lee,
Good evening.
Vice Chairman Creamer, members of the board, Dr. Navarro, audience in the room,
And the
audience
millions online.
online. I briefly come before you today as a parent, a former educator, and taxpayer to address the current budget request that I entitle Needs versus Wants. A need is something essential, such as food, clothing, shelter, and water, or in this case, teachers, students, classroom space, and food services. A want is something you wish, desire, or feel is a need, such as brand name clothing or food, 8-bedroom house, Perrier water, or in this case, $80,000 starting salary for teachers, 100% of our students reading at grade level by the end of the calendar year, modernized classes, or cook-to-order non-processed food. At some point in our personal, professional lives, we have to make the tough financial decisions based on needs versus wants. For example, I had to manage a $4 million budget from what was a $4.5 million budget and was told to make it happen. I had to consolidate services and programs, non-renew a contract, and focus more on the military needs versus the military wants. Charles County Public Schools is seeking $17 million to fully fund the school budget, yet Charles County Public Schools has a $30 million reserve. That money belongs to the taxpayer, and because of current Maryland law, you get to keep it. So use some of it. Charles County is requesting approximately 47% of taxpayer funds versus what is now allocated, I believe, around 44%. And never, in my experience in living in Charles County, as well as any government agencies, have I heard anyone say, well, I think the next year we'll take less money so we can be fiscally conservative. You're gonna have to make the tough decisions and reassess your needs versus wants. I'm not sure how you're gonna do it, but it's gonna have to happen. I expect you to do more with less or dig into our reserves and make it happen versus waiting for it to happen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Terry. Ms. Acton, would you mind speaking to the fund balance? Thank you. We did have a conversation about that last night at our work session. Did you want to add something?
Sure, and I just want to, I think it's important to understand that first and foremost, school systems all around Maryland have a fund balance. And I think it is a little bit different than other agencies in the counties, but school systems are the largest share of any county or city's budget, like the city's budget and so forth. The second thing that I think is important is we have seen, and time we continue to see school systems in terms of why do they keep this fund balance? What is a fund balance and why do you keep a fund balance? Our current fund balance is somewhere around 30 million. We are taking, as part of this fiscal year, we are taking a slice of that fund balance in to account, to make up some deficit in terms of funding deficit. But I will tell you that it is fiscally important that school systems maintain those reserves because as the largest operating organization in any local jurisdiction, it is also highly probable that it'll have unexpected costs that it'll have to deal with at some point, and it needs to have those funds. The other thing that I'll say about the fund balance is that the fund balance isn't, it's used up. 2 years ago, we came to the board, 2 years ago, I think, Karen, right? Because when we did all of the, no, maybe it was last year, when we did all of the reconciliations of paying out the benefits to employees, we had about 4 or 5 cases that drew up that queued up our cost of maintaining the benefits of employees by about $3.5 million from what we projected. It happens, right? You have certain individuals that may go through something and 4 or 5 cases can increase that funding. That was an unexpected cost that we had to pay to maintain our balanced budget, and that comes out of one-time cost. So Karen, talk to us a little bit about that. Why do we keep it? When do we use it? And what does it mean in terms of maintaining that reserve, if you will?
Sure. So as you mentioned, it is an emergency fund for us to use for one-time funding. Dr. Navarro is talking about our health insurance. We're self-insured, which means that we actually are paying out the claims for all of our employees. And there's no way to predict that if somebody has a medical emergency or medical event that goes into a lot of dollars. And it was about $3.5 to $4 million that we had to increase it. So when I spoke last night, I estimated about a $30 million amount in our fund balance, but our audited statements, actually, we had $25 million in our unassigned balance. And that unassigned balance, what it is, how we break that out is we reserve about 7.5% of our claims as part of that balance. We hold that in reserve. We have a contingency reserve, so that in and our audited statements was about $5 million, $4.9 million. Our contingency reserve is 1% of our annual operating budget. And that changes each year based on our operating budget of about 4.4. And then the remaining, the largest share of it, which was about 15.7 million, is for capital maintenance, such as a roof, a boiler, asphalt, whatever type of problem we might have in a building. And then also what we've spent a lot of time talking about already is our technology reserve. That's both in that number. So it's important. We do have about $5 million in this year's budget coming out of our fund balance. And really, you shouldn't be doing that, because if you were to take that $5 million and we have to use it each year, in 5 years we're down to zero. And if we're down to zero, anytime that we have any of these emergencies that pop up, we would have to go back to the county and ask for additional funding throughout the year to cover those costs. So it is not fiscally prudent to let that balance get too low. So the county does have a fund balance policy that says that we should keep between 8% and 15% of our operating budget in reserve for these emergencies, and we have about 5.6% in there. So we are not
below what we should have
funded in our fund balance.
Yeah.
And it's something that we have to be careful about, because if you do let it get down to a very low amount, and we have our only funding choices are the county and the state.
Yeah.
And so if we were to have the Baltimore Bridge, who knows how that's going to affect state funding, right? Which also affects county funding. Right. So if we were to really have a very bad funding year, we would have to dip into that to maintain the services that we are providing right now at a much greater level than what we've done this year. So, it's prudent for us to try to hold that balance as much as we can.
And I appreciate that, Ms. Acton, because to say that you have 25 million or so in reserves sounds like a lot of money, but when your budget for the year is, the ask is 523 million. Again, I'm not going to do the math, but you can appreciate what percentage that is. It's very low relative to how much we have to spend, in a year. So thank you for that.
Any questions?
Just had a quick clarification. Thank you so much for that, Ms. Acton. When we talk about sort of school situations, boilers, roofs, which we all know as, homeowners are very expensive. I couldn't imagine, well, I do know what it is to cost in terms of the school system, but the average person doesn't, but you can imagine how much it is. If a boiler were to go out at a school and we did not have the funding to cover it, and we did have to go back to the commissioners and ask for that money, how long would that school be closed because we were not able to provide heat for that building?
It could certainly be closed for quite a while. That's definitely a Mike Heim question, but You know,
Yeah.
the commission, you would have to get approval from the commissioners, and the funds would have to be released before we would be able to repair it, which would take time for sure.
That's assuming they had it to release.
Correct.
Yeah. Ms. Kramer?
That's a good point, Ms. Smith, because I was thinking, I know when we replaced, I don't know, La Plata or someone recently, it was like around between 10 to 14 million. So you're talking 30 million or 25 million sounds like a lot of money, right? 2 schools, that's all it would cover, a boiler, you know what I mean, or whatever. The other thing is that I think what's more important is, to Dr. Navarro's point in the presentation, we can't continue on this trajectory. Because even if, say, for example, we took all the fund balance to fund the 17 million, what will we do next year if it happens again? You know what I mean? So this is the importance of saying to our commissioners, we need to be fully funded, and we need to not only be fully funded, but make sure that we sort of, to Dr. Navarro, use Dr. Navarro's words, get a bigger piece of the pie like we used to, because this is important. And when you look at her presentation, I mean, everything is important. So, you know, as Chairwoman Morley said, you look at, you know, if you're planning for your personal budget at home, you might look at, okay, what can we cut out, you know, what's maybe not so important. But when I look at this, everything is important.
Absolutely.
So it's really hard to make those decisions. And we're not just talking about 1 year, because some of these are startup costs, right? But then next year, we need them again. You know, we need additional funding to continue. So as Ms. Samisha Thomas said, it's like running a marathon and then quitting at the end. So we're starting all these things, and the blueprint is great, but we have to be able to have continuous commitment from our legislators, both locally and at the state level, to help us continue what we started. Otherwise, we're doing our kids a disservice.
Absolutely.
And to
Thank you.
reiterate what you said, just to make sure that the point is, everyone understands it in the community, the fund balance is only supposed to be used for one-time funding. So, for instance, to fix that boiler at Wade or La Plata or wherever, to use it as part of your operating budget is not a good thing to do, because it's recurring. You're going to have
Right.
to do it every year unless you get additional funding somewhere along the line.
Yeah, and keeping in mind these buildings, of course, house, you know, at North Point, but close to 2,000 students.
We keep talking about the buildings, and I don't want Mike to think I don't.
Oh, yes. Yeah, come on up, Mr. Hines. We appreciate that.
He's like,
Yeah.
this is my area.
This is my area.
You have
And just,
39 buildings, something can
right,
happen.
something's always going to happen. And also,
Bad
one other
mouthing you.
point.
You do a good job.
Yeah, one other quick point, Mr. Heim, that you mentioned yesterday, Ms. Acton, good evening, that this is also the things that we're potentially not funding are just kind of being kicked down the road, for lack of a better phrase, but they still need to happen. And so it's the snowball effect. If it doesn't happen in 25, and then, you know, we're looking at 26, it's going to be substantially more because it didn't happen in 25. So we're really kind of working against the grain, so to speak. But Mr. Heim, yes.
So I would just like to clarify one thing with the boiler systems. With the work that was done at La Plata High School, and that was overall was around $16 million. That was beyond just replacing the boiler. So I don't want anybody out in the public to think that it cost us between 10 to 14 million.
For boiler, right?
To replace the boiler. So depending upon the size of the school, that determines the size of the unit that is needed. So that could cost anywhere between $300,000 to $1 million for the boiler. So the work for the public's understanding that was done at La Plata, that was almost a complete replacement of both the heating and cooling system. So that included replacing the rooftop units, that included doing some new work with the ductwork that was already existing in the building, replacing the new diffusers in the classrooms, along with replacing the actual heating and cooling system. So a boiler would cost us somewhere between $300,000 to $1 million if we had to replace it at a school.
Thank you for that clarification.
You're welcome.
Exactly, or mine either.
Yeah.
How about the roof?
I just didn't
Right.
want
Roof
someone.
costs a
I just didn't
lot.
want someone
That would
out
be the
there
headline.
in the public.
They say that.
Yes.
Does that work? You're
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, they're getting taken over the.
Right. That would
Break
be the
over the
headline
coals.
tomorrow for sure, yes.
But speaking
Yeah.
of roofs, so we did 2 roof replacements recently, which were funded through both combination of the county and the state. So we did a roof replacement at Westlake and a roof replacement at John Hanson Middle School, and those both were around $3 million to replace those roofs.
Okay. All right, Ms. Butler Washington will be the final question on the subject.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. I want to just ask this, on the county website, I think it's a little confusing. They have education 235,393, but underneath they got 218,767, but they got 44.6%. So it appears that they're giving you 46.6, and it's not.
Correct.
I knew I was right.
Lights
Yes.
go out.
So
I
that
was going back and forth
that
with-
includes the College of Southern Maryland and also the libraries. So
that's
that's
all
not our-
education.
Yeah, they lump that all under education, but it's not our funding in totality.
It's the majority of it.
Yes,
is,
yes.
But.
not all of it.
they
Not
include
entirely.
that.
No, I just wanted to know ours. Ours is 41.
Correct.
41.5.
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
That is important. Yeah, good point, Ms. Bella Washington, because
Yeah.
they're all lumped together. And even though we are the majority, that's still not all of that. 100% of that money is not ours. So good point.
Thank you. Okay, Ms. Mackey, is there another speaker? Oh, Ms. Warren.
Warren had a question.
Just real quick, when you all were talking about the maintenance, and you probably shared this before, Mr. Hine, but it's worth me asking again. I guess, how are we planning operationally for the upkeep of these kind of these maintenance, fixing the water heater, things like that? I mean, I'm sure we have a schedule, a timing, so everything doesn't catch us off guard, so we're not prepared. So.
Sure. So an important part of upkeeping our buildings is preventative maintenance. So that includes the large mechanical systems, the boiler systems, the air conditioning systems that we talked about. So before we begin the cooling season, we have steps that we take to make sure that those systems are ready to operate. Once the cooling season ends, we take steps at the end of the season to make sure that those systems are deactivated. So with the cooling towers and in the chillers, we're going to drain the water systems, and we're going to be doing other preventative maintenance with that. Along with that HVAC, it's periodically throughout the year we have based upon the system and the type of system, we're replacing the filters for those systems. And the same thing with the boilers. Before the heating season, we are doing preventative maintenance. Then post heating season, we're doing post maintenance for those systems. But when you're looking at roof, it's doing roof inspection. So it's also relying upon our building service, who are actually assigned to those schools, who are actually around those systems on a daily basis. So if they notice things or something does break, there's a work order system, online system we use. So we'll track. So if we have a boiler system that's 25 years old, and over the last 7 years we've had, just say, 15 work orders to do work on that, that's going to alert us that there's an issue with that. But also tracking those systems. Each of those systems have an intended life expectancy, so that is also entered into the work order system. So we know specifically when that unit was bought and theoretically, the end life for that unit. So preventative maintenance is a key part in keeping those things going. But even with that, there are going to be unexpected things that happen. So it was referenced earlier in this meeting that we had the boiler weight, it was down earlier this year. Fortunately, that was just an electrical issue, so it was not the system that the system was at failure. But that is the original system for Wade Elementary School. So that if you look at our 10-year CIP plan, that is in our request to the state to replace that system. So that's working with our CIP, and we get on average around $9.8 million per year from the state for either new school construction, renovations, or just general maintenance upkeep. So we have to balance that, and from year to year, you'll see that we might have, like for example, this year we had 11 projects on our list. We're going to be funded for 4 of those projects. So theoretically, those 7 that were not funded for this year are going to go on next year's list, and we may prioritize them based upon work that we have to do on a roof or a boiler or an HVAC system during the course of this year.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
Good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
We're really excited about boilers. I wish we were excited about literacy as we were about buildings. So I have a couple questions. I actually have a lot of questions, so you let me know what's the best way to do this. Maybe I can ask a question and maybe we can try to answer it, or I can just go through all of them, but you guys let me know what's best. The first one would be, and I know where I can find this information, but can we tell the public where we can find our previous financial audits? And can we share what our 2023 financial audit reported for a reserve? Where we can find our financial audits? Right, can we tell the audience that? Because those are a lot of questions that our parents had, is understanding where we can find that information. I know where to find it, but if we can tell the audience how to find it. And then what did our 2023 financial audit report for reserves? That's what I was talking about, the $25 million.
Karen, can you come up and just
Thank you.
Respond to where in our website we post our audits? And also the Maryland the Maryland State Department post all of the school systems audits as well on their website.
They do, but our website does have our audits along with our budget. If, I don't know, I don't have the website up there to be able to direct you right to it. But if you search for audits, it'll take you right to it. And our audited reserve for unassigned fund balance was the 25 million.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Since we're talking about the fund balance, is there a policy or law that determines an amount or a percentage of the budget that needs to be reserved for emergencies? If so, can you please elaborate? And how much of the reserves can we actually spend?
Yeah.
So
We
Karen,
just talked about that.
So Karen will read it again.
Yes, please
Come
share it
back.
again, Ms. Acton. She did answer that.
Yeah, you're the 8 to 15.
Yeah.
Go ahead, say it again.
Thank you, Ms.
Yes,
Acton.
so there is no law that says what we need to do. The county has a fund balance policy that we recognize and, you know, try to make sure we stay within that guidelines, but quite frankly, we don't have to. Their policy is between 8 and 15% of the operating budget. We do have internal policies, which I mentioned. We have 7.5% of our claims for health insurance. We hold in reserve a 1% contingency, and we try to stay within, you know, at the lower end. Actually, we've never been up to 15% of operating budget. We're currently at 5.6%. So.
And we're recognizing the policy that the county uses, but as a school district, we don't have a policy.
We don't have a written policy that says we have to have a certain percentage. That's correct.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So it did say that last year, because I did look at the audits, that we did have, and correct me if I got the numbers wrong, but it was 8.6 million in the end of year funds. And then now we have those reserves of the 25 million. Last year, though, as I'm hearing things about boilers and buildings, a lot of our families were asking for different supports that we kept hearing we don't have money for. That included literacy supports, math supports, that included basic necessities for some of our educators. So how do we kind of justify that for our families as we're asking for more this year? And of course, the needs continue to increase. We recognize that. But how do we make that make sense for families where they're coming to us and asking, you know, the system for more help and more supports and more resources, and we're telling them we don't have enough money, we don't have enough of a workforce, we don't have enough resources, but we are kind of sitting on money at the end of the year. How do we make that make sense?
Do you want me to? So I would say last year, so there's two different things. There's fund balance, which is sort of that, those fundings that we mentioned this year. We went into our fund balance. We're a little lower than we should be, and we put in $5 million into our budget. Last year, there is the dollars that are sort of salary lapse. What happens if you don't fill every single position? You have some positions that you didn't, and what we use those for. If we go back to the intercategory changes that we presented to the board last year, there is honestly, there's a combination of priorities with what do we do with end year balance. Some of them were based on things like continuing transportation needs that we needed for families. Some of them were sort of CIP. We had some issues in some buildings, and as Mr. Heim sort of mentioned in very detailed format, there were some operational things that we just didn't get funded for that we prioritized because of the upkeep of the buildings. But I would also say that end of year balance, end of year salary lapse also funded a lot of the purchasing for reading and math interventions for last year. So I actually wouldn't 100% agree. I think there is a combination of things, and in making those decisions, we prioritize both. So let me give you an example. We used some of those funds to fund some of the reading intervention materials that we knew we were going to start the year off, training teachers on as we brought them in. So I think there's a combination of expenditures with those end-of-year balances that we're doing. I will also say that, frankly, one of the things, because we have to plan for plan A, B, C, D, Some of the reading and math interventions that we need to continue to purchase more licenses for and continue the purchasing of materials. If we're not more fully funded in this FY25 budget, we will have to use some end of salary lapses to purchase the materials this coming summer, because we have to have them ready. And so I think it's a combination of things. I think it's both. It's running the whole system means that some dollars are gonna have to be spent operationally in maintenance, and some of them are gonna be just catching up with instructional materials. One other thing that I think is important is we needed some things for the arts for students as well, and we had to use some end-of-year funding because we were just running a deficit on the budgeted line items that we had projected. Sometimes we project that we're gonna spend, I don't know, $300,000 in instrument repairs or purchasing additional instruments for students, and sometimes we go over budget and we still have a need, and so we will use some of the salary lapse at the end of the year to get those instruments back up and running and ready to go as well. So it's a combination of things. I'm not discounting your question, Ms. Smalls, but I do think if you go back and look at last year, how we brought to the board for approval what we spend on, it's a combination of both sorts of things that we had to spend money on.
Yeah. Okay, real quick, Ms. Mackey, how many more speakers do we have signed up?
So we do have two other folks here in person who have some comments or some questions to share. I do want to pivot to your question about the budget and where the information is on our website. So our website has a lot of fun content on it, right? We do have a menu item that's called Quick Links that has our top 20 hit pages of our website. The budget's, I think, the top third. And our audit history report goes back to 2018. It's on the page. You just have to scroll for it. So I just wanted to share that with you and with the viewing public as well. So we do have a few other folks here. We do have some folks who have joined online who declined to speak at this time.
Okay. All right, Ms. Small, I know you said you have a few questions. If you could maybe do your last two.
Yep, I can do some more. Okay, in terms of then, we were just talking about literacy. What amount of the budget is going to ensure that we are leading the way and ensuring that all children are proficient and on grade level in reading? And not just the ones that are going into the third grade, but actually in like middle school and high school as well. If we had to estimate it from the budget, how much is going to literacy supports and instruction?
So that's an interesting question. Do you also count the staffing?
I do. I count staffing, interventions, professional development on science of reading, and any kind of curriculum or instruction materials.
So I don't know if we have all of those things, but I asked you to mention them so that we
Yes.
could actually run it and put it out there. Mr. Lowndes, do you have any, you asked for all of them, so it's staffing, curriculum, professional development, because, for example, the letters training alone,
Yep.
we're still paying out, I just signed off on another purchase order for them. Do you have any, we can get back to you with comprehensives, but some information on it.
So I will have to get back as well because, a good portion of the summer boost programs in our elementary is really focused in on that. So when you look at what our summer boost program is in the summer, it's focused in on math and reading. And so, all of the staff that we hire in the summer for the summer boost programs and the curriculums, and we buy more interventions and intervention material for the summer and summer boost to continue kids that are actually making progress with the interventions that are going on during the year to continue going on during the summer. And that's also funded within the budget. And that's under actually a different area. It's under the boost extended learning opportunity budget. So I would have to work with the budget to get a better idea of exactly how much we're spending on literacy.
You can count summer programs. That's fine. Yeah, all of it helps. Okay.
I can jump in and say that 64% of our budget is instruction.
Yeah.
So I just want to mention that for the public. That includes,
Thank you.
obviously,
Exactly.
that's not just reading, but that's.
Right.
Yeah.
If we could
Significant.
get the numbers specifically for literacy, that'd be great. And then my last question would be, how do you all think that Senate Bill 1026 and House Bill 1115, County Boards of Education Budgets, Transparency in Education Spending Act, will help us understand better where exactly taxes are going and where exactly everything is broken out?
Yeah, we did talk about that. Yeah, I was gonna say we did talk about it, but go ahead, yes, please.
So I think those are important factors, and we will say that we were one of the counties that we have a really good relationship with the county office, and so we've never, the way those bills came to be was because I think there were some jurisdictions that had really difficulty with that transparency. And we meet regularly with the county staff, and we send them regular reporting on it. I actually would say that better transparency in public education spending is probably going to be viewed, even though it's going to give us like 3 additional gray hairs, it's the blueprint. So the blueprint to me, where it says the money follows the kid, is with this whole state of Maryland is shifting its way in which the CFOs are having a wonderful time with this. The way we follow the money by kid in schools and so forth. And so I think that will give a better picture for the transparency, in educational spending. And I actually view it as a plus for all of us because we will be learning. So we'll be learning on the expenditure, what it takes, and what does it really take to spend funding. And I gave a really good example. I was with Dr. Wright and a couple of other superintendents last week, and I'll just give this one, especially to you, because I think you will understand what I'm saying with this one. So I said, you have an English language learner right now that has the same funding amount, regardless if they're in kindergarten as a emergent bilingual or if they're a kid coming in as a 10th grader, right? And I would say right now, my inclination, and I think these funding structures will help us see this better, my inclination would be you put that kindergarten or say a first grader in a rich, solid, literacy-rich learning environment in first grade. And just for the mere fact of where they are developmentally in language acquisition, they're learning English and everything, their language acquisition capabilities are going to soar through. And that funding model may be really solid in strong instructional programs, science of reading, that helps not only that English language learner, but also other kids who may be struggling with reading, right? And so the investment for that kid looks different than, say, you have a 10th grader who has interrupted education, comes in with low literacy levels in their first language, and is trying to acquire a second language, plus is in a high school environment where you have 7 or 8 periods a day taught by different teachers. I have a feeling that once we go through this experiment and begin to look at the money following the kid, we will see that greater resources actually to support that student in high school are necessary, even though the 2 students may have the same label, if you will, and weight financially in the system. So I actually look forward to the learning that we're going to be doing as a state to understand exactly how we look at resources and where do they impact and where do we have to spend the most resources to impact student learning. And that is differentiated. Not everything is sort of one way or the other. So, okay. Sorry, long speech on that, but I've been thinking about that quite a bit.
No, I appreciate that. Thank you. Those were my questions. One more ask is that we do this maybe in language. So because a lot of the funding comes, again, I know locally, state, and we're forgetting federal also. If we can maybe share this also with our ESOL community. I know that's 15 different languages, but maybe let's pick one. But we haven't had these conversations in another language, and so we're missing out on a lot of constituents that the money's actually going to help as well. So thank you.
Right. Thank you.
Ms. Hawkins, do you want to come forward? Do you want to speak from your seat?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
So, good afternoon.
Good afternoon. You're fine.
You're fine. This is my first time. I'm sorry. My question is about supportive staff.
Okay.
Can you tell me what funding of your budget is going to help push more salary to us as supportive staff? This is my second school year in the county. I've lived in the county for a total of 3 years now. But as far as supportive staff, I feel as though that we are the backbone to the school, and we get pushed to the back. We are not looked at as equal to anyone. I'm at my school every day at 6 o'clock, opening up, cooking for children to make sure that they have breakfast, lunch. And it might look like it's an easy job, but it's a very hard job.
No, it
We're
doesn't.
understaffed.
Yeah.
We don't have equipment that works, and we're not getting paid anything. I'm running from one job to the next just to try to make my household function. And it's very hurtful to not get that point across, that I see a lot of this, and I don't understand the budget, but when I look at the breakdown, we're not getting anything as supportive staff. And we make the school run. We're the backbone to make sure our school, that's building service, that's maintenance, that's our transportation, that's food service. Without us, the educator, they can't teach, the kids can't learn. Why is that not important?
I definitely would never say it's not important, is the first point. And I definitely understand where you're coming from, because we have had these conversations. In terms of the percentage of the budget, was that your ask?
Yes.
Of what that's definitely a Ms. Acton question. I don't know if we have that specific breakdown, or under overall salaries.
So in terms of like salary,
So, yeah, I think that-
increases or something? Is
Well,
that what
I think she's asking what
I-
we're projecting
yes.
for,
What
for
is
And
going to
that's
be
confidential.
for the future.
Yes, we do have an agreement with AFSCME. Miss Sarah Birch is here.
Yeah.
And with EACC, I know Ms. Pipkin is here. So they have negotiated increases, and our plan is to fund those. But I can't tell you that at this point in time, because
I just want to,
signed.
Can you say what it is roughly now to give, get an idea?
What do you mean?
The percentage
percentage of the budget for the AFSCME and the support staff? I don't know if it's a
Because
number you have
we
candidly.
put all of our salaries together.
Okay, so it's not
could get it
separated
for
out.
you, but I don't have it.
Yes, ma'am.
To know how much is AFSCME and how much is EACC.
Gotcha.
Okay.
So,
I just want you to think about,
Yeah.
when y'all looking at the budget, do not forget about supportive staff.
Absolutely.
And if I may add, so Ms. Hawkins, last year, the budget, the budget that was approved by the board, moved all salaries starting no less than $15 an hour, which was a big move for the school system, because we still had salaries that were less than $15 an hour. And when that happens, it moves everybody up. So it's not just the starting, it's everybody. While we can't comment on the pending negotiation piece, we are well aware of remaining competitive in terms of our wages, not just with our teachers, but also with our support staff. Frankly, it is the reason, and I don't think you were here yet, but it is the reason why the first slide in terms of the things that are funded in our budget and that we're asking for funding for is the employee compensation piece. I am hopeful that you see a trajectory. If you're able to look at, last year, we increased, last year we can talk about, because last year happened, we increased a step and 5% COLA for AFSCME. We also have in this budget a line item to continue a compensation study to again look at market share and continue to push for better salaries so that we can remain competitive, so that people say, yeah, I'll work for food and nutrition, or I'll work in IT, or I will work in, I agree 100%. And I will tell you that AFSCME, I don't think everybody knows this, but AFSCME has a rolling holiday. And when I first got here, and this just goes to the fact that this is the backbone of our organization, if AFSCME employees are out, we have to shut down the school system.
Yeah.
So it was interesting because everybody talks about, and our teachers are wonderful, our administrators are wonderful, but the AFSCME rolling holiday has to be put on a calendar where the system is closed because there's no one to open the doors, there's no one to let anybody in. So I hope that it is the number one proposed priority for me to the board, regardless of how we are funded by the county. But I hope that you are able to join us tomorrow as we speak to the commissioners around the importance that our people are our number one asset, And my hope is also that as we move forward, you see that we are negotiating in good faith around trying to continue to keep our support services competitive in terms of wages. And I hope that you join us tomorrow so that you can also speak to that, on that. So thank you for coming.
Thank you, Ms.
Ms.
Hawkins.
Can I just make a comment too, real quick, Chairperson Morley?
Ms. Hawkins.
Ms. Hawkins, I just also wanted to say thank you for your comments, and I don't think that anyone thinks your job is
Absolutely
easy
not.
at all. And actually, at our last town hall, we had a town hall on food and nutrition, and his first name was Bill. What's the gentleman's name that came and spoke? I can't remember his last name. Yes, and he came and spoke about all of everything that goes into the food and nutrition work that is being done behind the scenes, not just the serving in the line to the kids, right? But the purchasing, all the prep work, and the staffing challenges that you face, right? He talked about all of that. So that was really helpful, I think. I know for me as a board member, and I think all of my colleagues agreed, because some of it is things that do go on behind the scenes that even we weren't privy to, right? So I just want to say after that, I had certainly a newfound appreciation for everything that you all do in food and nutrition. So I just wanted to say that.
Thank you. And if I could piggyback on that, that's an excellent point, because he spoke about things that we take for granted about the existing building structure, and that determines how many people you can feed at one time and how much staff you need, and how quickly you can turn over from one lunch section to another. And so there's incredible amount of coordination and detail that goes into that every single day. And most of us, or several of us, have children currently in the school system. So please,
Regardless of what happens,
yeah.
if I'm understaffed, I still have to get it.
Absolutely.
You have to make it happen.
You have to make
right?
it happen.
Yeah.
That's hard when you are 4 people down
Yeah.
and 600-700 kids in
Absolutely.
2 hours.
Absolutely.
I'm coming from industry,
Yeah.
from Marriott, and I took a pay cut to come into the school system to be on the same structure and a time schedule as my children, to not
understand
be
that.
getting the wages that I need.
Yeah.
This year, I had to find a second job, and I'm running. In between jobs, I shouldn't, when my main job should be enough. I should be able to go home to my family and still, be a mom. I'm 36, and we don't get paid anything. It looks like cents for the time that I spend at the school feeding y'all children. And that's hurtful. I live in the county.
Yeah.
My kids go to school in the county. I'm paying tax-paying dollars. Why am I struggling this hard? I come in every day. I'm on time. I'm a manager. If I'm out, if I don't have it, if I don't need it, I have to run to another school. If the oven breaks down, I still have to make it happen. It's very hard, and I feel we get overlooked. I'm the youngest in food service, but it's a hard job even for myself.
If you don't mind, Ms. Hawkins, I'd like to speak to you afterwards. I want to sit down and talk to you.
Okay.
As it hurts me to know that you in any way feel not appreciated.
Yeah.
But thank you so much for coming out.
Yes,
Very
thank
much
you.
appreciated. Oh, Ms. Yes.
Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Ms. Hawkins. And what you do is extremely important. And I agree with everything you said. There's a place I go early in the morning, every morning to get coffee, and it's usually around 5 o'clock. And there's always the same group of ladies there that work for our system. This is at 5 in the morning going to open up a school system. And I don't know what time they leave, but it probably wasn't too long ago from now. And that is the going thing. I'll talk to them every now and then, and it seems to be the common theme is they do feel overlooked, and that's a shame, and we do need to work on that. And one thing I've brought up in meetings before is, thank goodness we finally raised our minimum wage to $15 an hour, but that's still, you can't live off that. And I've always thought, we have a school system where we push our students and we brag about a first-class education and how successful they're going to be when they leave here, which is great, but we're not reciprocating that with the folks that we hire to make all of that happen. So I believe we can do a whole lot better
Yeah.
we can do a whole lot better. And I just want to thank you for speaking tonight.
Agreed, Mr. Hand. Yes. And we needed to hear it, so thank you for reminding us. Thank you. Ms. Butler Washington.
I just want to say a small thing. I just want to say thank you. And thank you for your bravery for getting up and speaking your heart. And we did hear you, and we do appreciate you.
Thank you, Ms. Hawkins. Ms. Mackey.
Ms. Pipkin, you want to come on up?
Good evening, Dr. Navarro, Chair Morley, Vice Chair Kramer, and board members. Just a couple things on behalf of EACC and employees. Many of you know, I think, I'm the full-time staff that supports educators here in Charles County from MSEA. So I think there's a few points that, on behalf of educators, I want to reiterate. And it kind of piggybacks a little bit on Ms. Hawkins a little bit. We made a commitment 2 years ago to go to a multi-year budget, and with EACC we took a risk and we said we're going to really have a multi-year contract for planning purposes. And I know that the former Board of Ed was very nervous about that because, you know, you have funding sources, but the law says if you don't get the funding you need, you have to go back to the table. And on behalf of employees, I just appreciate that you're prioritizing funding the agreements, because negotiated agreements are a contract, they're a promise. Yeah. And so keeping promises to employees is essential to retention. And so I think that, you know, regardless of whatever happens with the county budget, and we'll be out there with you tomorrow advocating, it's important to keep those promises. Because the last 2 years, we've been leading the Tri-County area in starting salaries because of that negotiations. And now they all have agreements, or Calvert's still negotiating. And so we'll see what happens, you know, when that finishes. And then I want to kind of go back to the earlier comment about healthcare. So we talk about healthcare and that we're self-funded. And I think most people in private industry don't understand what that means. And essentially it means that the school system pays a share and employees pay a share, their premiums, and all of that pot of money must pay all of the claims. And if it doesn't, the school system, as the carrier of the policy, experiences what's called a call, which means the school system must write the check for every amount of money that goes beyond what was collected. So that's what it means to be self-insured. So I noticed in the budget documents, and I just want to thank you, like, we've come such a far way in transparency around our budget in the time that I've been here since 2020, and like calling out what all the line items are and being really specific. And I think that's been great. But I think when you talk about your fund balance, and that was a hot topic when I first got here, that idea that you have to have that reserve set aside in case you have claims that exceed what you collected. And I'll just call out nobody's personal business, but if someone has a NICU baby,
that's it.
Millions of dollars, right, for that care, depending on how long that child's in the NICU. Serious bouts of cancer treatment. High dollar prescriptions, which I will tell you, if you look at our healthcare data in general, and no names attached, and look, educators are on some of the most expensive drugs because of the stress that they're under. All educators are AFSCME folks as well. Things for stress and anxiety and depression and cardiac issues, because it's a hard job. You know, we love it, but it's a hard job. So it is part of the benefit, but it's a shared cost. Cautionary tale, if you go back to 2017 and you do a little Google searching, we had a sister county who did not respect their health care fund. And they got in bad business practices of supplanting money from the healthcare fund, the reserve, into the general fund, and were in a $50 million hole when I got to that county in 2017 as somebody who was supporting employees. And it took them 4 or 5 years to work their way out of it. It cost them staff cuts. It cost them backslides in programs. The cost was exponential. So I would urge you to do what you have to do to be fiscally sound in relationship to that. And so I think that part is really important. And then I guess the last thing I would say to you, and hopefully we'll have a good turnout at the county commissioner hearing, is that the more we can do to put, you know, I'm kind of disappointed that we don't have more people in the room. I'm sure you are too. The back and forth ability tonight is really nice. But the other piece of it is like we need to start sooner on the education of our community and like what the budget is and what it does. I mean, we're in a very different place, even though we didn't get everything we asked for, than our colleagues in St. Mary's right now who are tonight fighting for not closing schools and cutting of programs and things like that, over $200 in taxes a year. So I just want to say to you that, like, keep up the good work, but also remember that, you know, everybody's kind of diving into the budget as they can and trying to make sense of it, but we are a people business. You know, we're people driven. And we all know what our experiences are, no disrespect to anybody who works for the school system for proximity or anything like that, but it's a human interaction that we have every day. So prioritizing our people is really important, and we just, on behalf of employees, I want to thank you for that. And we'll continue to work with you to kind of push for the funding. And then last thing is the percent of the budget. So most people probably do not understand that when we get funding from other agencies, state, federal, local, inflation is not baked into the funding formula. So when our costs go up, I'm not just talking about student enrollment, but when our costs go up for gas, utilities, food purchases, whatever those things are, those general operating costs, that isn't accounted for in the funding formula. So a 41% this year is not all the real dollars we need because it doesn't take into account inflation. And I think most people don't know that or understand that. And that's a really important point when we're addressing the county commissioners because, you know, inflation is real, you know, and I don't think anyone knows that. So, you know, thank you so much for tonight and all you do.
Thank you, Ms. Pipkin.
Ms.
Appreciate
Pipkin, that
that.
was fantastic. Thank you so much.
I think Pipkin was our last speaker,
Ms. Pipkin,
both
okay.
here in person and virtually.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Mackey. All right, board members, okay, I see some, Ms. Smith?
I'll be brief. Ms. Pipkin, definitely want to thank you for your accurate and impassioned speech. I think we definitely heard from Dr. Navarro. We heard from Ms. Acton in terms of the budget and the fund we spoke about. But to hear it from an educator's perspective, but someone who's not just a teacher in the classroom, but who also sees the entirety of the system from an educator's perspective, and be able to add that additional context in terms of what it means to be the carrier of a healthcare system, or what it means, what that actually looks like. Yeah. And how things can run afoul. And then to add the additional context from the system which you worked not Charles County, just to be clear, not Charles County, but the system prior to that and sort of how they ran afoul of that because they were dipping into their fund balance. I know we've also heard from Ms. Acton around the audit component.
Yes.
And how we will not get a clean audit if our fund balance is too low. And Charles County has prided itself on having clean audits for several years over. So definitely want to thank you for your comments. And I would implore my board members, I know that there's some misinformation floating around out there about the fund balance. I think we have to do our due diligence in making sure the public clearly understands. Obviously, it's being discussed here tonight. I know we have millions in the audience and millions online, but just making sure that our constituents truly understand what it means to advocate for a budget of this size while still maintaining the fund balance. So I'm just encouraging us to do more work beyond tonight to make sure the public truly understands what we're fighting for here.
Yes, absolutely. Thank you, Ms. Smith.
Excellent point, Ms. Smith.
Yes. Anyone else have any comments?
Brenda, I thought you had your hand up, Brenda. You didn't?
No.
Oh, I thought she did.
Oh, I thought she did. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, I have to echo what you said, Ms. Smith, and excellent points. And also appreciate your comments, Ms. Pipkin. It's not that it's perfect, but you understand that there's consistent good faith effort, which I know goes a long way. And, you know, I mean, I have to, just a moment of full disclosure, before I held this seat and ran for the office, I had all kinds of ideas. And I'm going to come in and do this, I'm going to come in and fix that. That's not how any of this works.
At all.
You know, because you have to consider, what'd you say? Right, exactly. We all did, right.
100%.
Yeah, absolutely. You know what I mean?
You don't know what you don't know.
You don't know what you don't know. And so to hear someone who's been in the system, who's worked here for years, who understands, you know, exactly how things run and the limitations that we're under. I mean, candidly, if we could, we'd love to have everyone starting at least $80,000.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what I mean? Or higher. So I very much appreciate your comments and the fact that you understand that it is a partnership and that we are committed to honoring the agreements. And unfortunately, if we do, and it's very likely that we will face this shortfall, the difficult decisions are going to ensue. And it doesn't mean that something is not important. And I just want to start there. Or that a position is not important, or the program is not important. Is that we must pay our people. I mean, that's non-negotiable. And we must have the money for the benefits. Because, I've shared before, I'm a cancer survivor. I know what those bills look like. And but for the fact that I had insurance, I would have been in trouble. So I know that one surgery can easily set you back $100,000 or more. So imagine that times even 3 or 4 people. And here we are looking at almost $500,000. So thank you very much. And thank you also for what you do for us every day. Very much appreciated. Any other comments? No.
We have 71 viewers right now.
Oh,
Nice.
okay. I'm
Hello,
going to add a couple of zeros.
Yes, hello.
Thank you all so much for tuning in,
Yes.
for joining us. As we mentioned, we will be tomorrow at 6 p.m. at the County Commissioner Building. Most of our board members are available and will be testifying. We're taking different segments of our budget, different priorities, to just kind of hone in on what that means, why that's important. For example, Ms. Butler Washington will be speaking on early childhood education. Why does that matter? What does that mean to the school system? Ms. Kramer, I know you're going to be talking about
Am I talking about
community schools, yes, community schools,
schools,
which we've heard that we're going to be, doubling the amount of community schools. So
Which
each
is
one of us has a specific segment that we're going to address, and we encourage all of you to please come out, make your concerns heard, because this is a partnership. And so the county commissioners, Mr. Patterson, our county commissioner vice president, was gracious enough to join us. We may have run him off because we directed a lot at him.
Yeah, he came
but,
last night.
Right, I appreciate him listening in, because a lot of these topics, a lot of these concerns were addressed last night, have been addressed in previous meetings, will be candidly addressed again, because, you solve one problem and 2 or 3 more pop up. But thank you all so very much for joining us this evening. If you you want to, sure.
Just real
okay.
quick. Thank you, Madam Chair.
No worries.
I know we have 71 people listening in online. I want to thank everyone who did come out in person as well. But just in case anyone came in late online, this is going to be posted, right? The recording. So if you missed anything from tonight or last night, we talked extensively about the budget as well. So please watch that back if you have questions about the budget or what we talked about tonight or anything else. But to Ms. Smith's point, I just wanted to just encourage the public to make sure that you come to the source when you're looking for information, because there is a lot of misinformation out there. And I'd rather you come to, either your school leaders or, central office leadership or one of us as board members to try to get your questions answered, than have a misunderstanding or misconception about, information that you read online. There's a lot of information that, for many reasons, gets posted in the social media world, or you just hear from, next door apps or, what ring apps, all of those things. And, it's for different reasons, some, not with any negative intent. But just want to encourage you that we're available. We're here. If you have questions, please come to the source. Like the teachers say, right? Your source, is important to the validity of the information that you're sharing, right? And so if you hear something and you're like, hey, this doesn't sound right, or why is this happening, reach out to your school leaders, if appropriate, or as I said, central office staff, whoever is appropriate. If you're not sure, reach out to one of us. I know I would be happy to point you in the right direction, or help answer questions if I can. And I'd rather that than misinformation getting spread around like a telephone game, because we all know how that ends. And ultimately, we want to put a positive message out for our school system, for our community, and for our students ultimately. And I think we all have to take ownership in that. So again, thank you all for joining tonight.
Yeah, and I'll just close to say that, we arguably as the members of the board are viewed as the employer. You know what I mean? So we have to be very mindful of the message that we put out. It's not to say that we think everything is perfect. We are very well aware that it's not. But imagine, at wherever you work, for those that don't work for us, constantly putting out negative information that would not be viewed in a very good light. And you candidly probably wouldn't be employed for very long. So I don't want anyone to think that we're under any illusion that we've solved all of the problems. We're just getting started. So please understand we are accessible. If you have any questions, my email address is ymorlee@ccboe. happy to, and I've respond to emails, sometimes candidly a little less timely than I would like, just depending on the volume. But I do have an open door policy. I'm willing to speak to any of you. Our collective board email is boardmail@ccboe. That will go to all of the board members. So we don't mind the uncomfortable conversations. Very much appreciate the partnership, because that's how a lot of these problems get solved. And as Ms. Kramer mentioned, the recording will be posted to our YouTube channel, and I believe our website, or is it just the YouTube channel? Well, for sure the YouTube channel.
Yeah.
Okay. Website as well.
Page on our website.
Okay, come on, Ms. Mackey. And I have to shout out our communications department, because you all have so considerably expanded the different outreach mechanisms that we do. And thank you for that. I got a text the other day about coming to this town hall meeting. I know we have our social media, our website. So we're trying to ensure that parents get this information, and the community members, many different ways. So if you have other suggestions of things you'd like to see us do, please share. But Kyle, we are done. Please take us off the air. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Good night.
Good night.
Aye.